Welcome back to Law and Crime. I'm Carissa Kranz, and I am going to carry you through the next few hours of gavel-to-gavel coverage of this new trial that we started today. We had opening statements, and right now on the stand is Laura Hodge, and she's under cross-examination. She's with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. For those of you just joining us, this is the Angela Kilgore case out of Tennessee, 2016 case. Quick recap. Kilgore is standing trial for killing a pawn shop owner. The owner's name was Jerry Don Ridge. That is the defendant's picture on the screen right now. She was at the pawn shop during an attempted robbery. Kilgore stabbed and shot Jerry and then lit the place on fire in order to destroy evidence. She also has a past history, not the smartest can here that we're dealing with. But nonetheless, she's standing trial. We have a trial to watch. We'll see where the pieces and facts may fall. Let's take a look at this expert on cross-examination. Right now, we have on the stand, we have Laura Hodges under cross-examination. The courtroom's a bit quiet right now. We're going to continue to monitor that. Also with us, we're going to have some studio analysis with Latonia Hines. She is a prosecutor, and we're going to have some fun dissecting this case as soon as we have more information, since this is just starting out. So let's go back to the witness on the stand who's in cross-examination while the defense is poking holes at their case. Okay, it looks like they're still not talking. Let's bring Latonia on and discuss this case. Latonia?
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you? Great to hear from you. I'm so glad you're joining us. So this case started today. As you know, this defendant has a bit of a history of an attempted bank robbery before this. She doesn't seem like the smartest or sharpest tool in the shed. Let's talk about for a second about who she is and her background and what the jury is likely to hear in this case based on her history.
Well, she definitely doesn't seem like the innocent type of person here that, oh, she's just gotten caught up into something and that there's no way that she could have done it. As a matter of fact, I think when they arrested her, they found tons of guns inside of her vehicle. And
yeah, more than a dozen handguns, actually, to be exact.
Yes.
And she was already on probation at that time, which is a violation of a federal release. So,
correct.
I mean, wow.
Correct. But as a prosecutor, you're going to have to be able to not only show that just because she has this colorful past, that she actually is the person who did the murder. And so that's where you're going to have to bring all these connections in. Is it going to make her sympathetic to the jury? No. But if you're a defense attorney, which I was for a short period of time, you also have to say that just because she's got a colorful past doesn't mean that she's guilty here, and that the prosecution still has to prove their case.
Okay, let's see how it goes. We're going to go back into the courtroom right now. We have a live feed, and it looks like there's some action. So we're all about action. Let's go. Welcome back. I'm Carissa Kranz. On the stand right now is Laura Hodge. She is with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. And what you heard was direct examination, cross-examination, redirect, recross. I want to bring on with me Latonia Hines. She's prosecutor. Latonia, how do you think it's going for this prosecution's witness? The defense is poking holes in the case. The prosecution is trying to rehabilitate it. What's your perspective?
I don't really think that the defense is poking holes. As a matter of fact, I'm having a little bit of consternation about the fact they're spending so much time going over and over again about her testimony experience and the training that she's been doing for doing that. I mean, she's doing what any GBI person or any other type of
expert pretty much trying to lay down the foundation
and I think that it's not a good sign if the defense's only defense is to break down how she's been taught to testify. You want to break down how she's been taught to investigate a scene. They started doing that a little bit, talking about the glove and how are things preserved, and that's where you go to. Don't have the jury sitting there wondering what you're talking about. Why are you bashing this person about whether or not she's looking at us or not? So I don't think that bodes well for the defense.
Okay.
But I think at the same time, the prosecution doesn't need to spend any time on it either.
Right. So we're going to continue to follow this. We have a live feed in the courtroom. We have to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a few minutes with more in-court testimony, more witnesses as the prosecution puts on their case. Stick with us. Welcome back. I'm Carissa Kranz, and on the stand right now, we have a live feed into the Kilgore trial out of Tennessee 2016 case, and you're listening to Daniel Foster. He is a prosecution witness, and he is from the State of Tennessee Fire Marshal Department. That's him on the stand right now. He just took a sip of water. What's interesting about him is he uses dogs and canines to assist his investigation in collecting evidence. With me, Latonia Hines, a prosecutor. How often do you see this in your own courtrooms where you have a fire marshal that relies on a canine and a dog to help him solve a case?
I can tell you I haven't had that, but it's not an uncommon thing. Law enforcement and emergency officials use dogs a lot of times, and they get specialized training for purposes of doing this. And with regard to just the same way that you do when you're doing cadaver dogs or whatever, they have such a keen sense of smell. And if you've trained them, they have such a high percentage of accuracy. And they usually, when they're doing that training, that's what you have to test on, their accuracy in finding these different items. And so with regard to this, it's with regard to the fire training. And that's the reason the prosecutor here is having to make sure that he lays the foundation so the jury understands what type of training this dog had, the reason why you rely on them, and so that when the results came back in this case, the jury should find them to be credible.
Well, we always say that animals have a sixth sense, right? Especially dogs. So here we are in our own legal system relying on the sixth sense of an animal to help solve a case in the prosecution's case. This is the Kilgore trial out of Tennessee, 2016 case. We have to go to a quick break. We're going to continue to monitor this live trial in the courtroom. Stick with us. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Memorial Day weekend is known for a time off work, cookouts, and pool parties. However, for 20-year-old Athena Curry, Memorial Day weekend 2011 would be the last time she was ever seen alive by her friends and family. The following Tuesday, Athena's live-in boyfriend and father of her child, Yusuf Majahid, will tell her family and police that Athena left the home around 3 a.m. Saturday morning after an argument regarding pictures Athena had found on his phone, leaving behind her then 16-month-old son, King. It's as if Athena Curry vanished without a trace. Joining me here on the Law and Crime Network is Aisha McGee, Athena Curry's older sister. At some point, she starts to date a guy named Yusuf. Do you know exactly when they started dating and what type of relationship the two had?
Yes, they started dating. She was a senior in high school.
I think there were some allegations of domestic violence, and especially I believe when Athena was in the hospital after giving birth to King. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes, sir, absolutely. The domestic violence started early on in their relationship, and I wasn't aware of all of it. As the investigation progressed, I found even journals and notebooks that she wrote about him beating her when she was pregnant. The day that she even was getting discharged from the hospital to bring King home, Yusuf was supposed to be at the hospital. I go to pick her up and the King up and Yusuf, and I'm, where's Yusuf? And she said, oh, we got into a fight, and he tasered her at the hospital with a taser gun.
Just so I'm clear, you're saying he actually used a taser that police use on the woman who had just given birth to his son at the hospital?
Yes, he did.
Wow.
Yes, he did.
So let's fast forward. This was the Friday before Memorial Day, 2011. So it's been 7 years. How and when did you actually find out your sister was missing?
It wasn't until that Tuesday after Memorial Day that I got a text message from Yusuf, and he says, hey, Aisha, this is Yusuf. Tell Athena to call me. And I'm like, what do you mean have her call you? She's supposed to be with you. And he said, no, she left Friday. And I'm thinking, Friday? I talked to her late Friday night, and she was at your house. And he said, oh, we got into a fight Friday about 3 a.m., and she stormed out and left. And I was thinking, okay, you didn't go after her? I said, she hasn't been home. She didn't come home. And then he said something that just made me just realize something was terribly wrong. He said she left King with him. And right there, I knew. My heart just sunk. And I said, I'm calling the police.
Do you believe that your sister Athena is alive and that you will hear from her?
No, it's almost impossible for me to believe that. She's 20 years old. Well, she would be 27. Where would she be for the past 7 years that she wouldn't contact her friends, her family, her son, anybody? And as soon as Yusuf had said that she left at 3 a.m. on a Friday and left King, my heart dropped then. In my mind, I said, oh my God, he actually did it. Like my worst fear came true then.
And if you have any information regarding the disappearance of Athena Curry, you're urged to call Atlanta Police Crime Stoppers at 404-577-8477. For the Law and Crime Network, I'm Vincent Hill.
Welcome back. I'm Carissa Kranz. On the stand right now is a Tennessee Bureau investigator. Her name is Darby Hutchison, and she was brought to the scene in the Kilgore trial because she was there to investigate the origin of the arson. Remember, this is the case, is 2016 case where Kilgore is accused and standing trial for allegedly killing a pawn shop owner, stabbing and shooting the owner, and then setting the place on fire. That's the defendant's picture right now on the screen. Setting the place on fire in order to destroy evidence. The defense is denying that that's what really happened. So the prosecution is laying the foundation, bringing witnesses onto the stand to investigate and to explain how they came to the conclusion. So what you just heard there was the conclusory bombshell piece of evidence from the prosecution's case that in her expert opinion, after doing the walkthrough, after going back the next day, she concluded that the fire, that the arson that was on the victim's body and at the pawn shop was intentionally set. And then she further explained how the canine dogs were brought to the scene to further corroborate that finding. We did hear from before Danielle Foster and another expert who explained the process of the dogs and how the dogs tip their snout in order to indicate certain evidence is found. With me is Latonia Hines, prosecutor. I want to give you an opportunity, Latonia, to give a comment before we go to break on what we just heard on the prosecution's case.
Oh, it's very important. We're now saying that there was not an accident, and that's what they need to be able to prove, that this was something that was intentionally done. And why would you intentionally do this but to cover up something? And what they're saying is that Kilgore wanted to cover up the fact that she murdered this person. And so this is a great testimony from the expert.
Well, I think sometimes what we learn in all these trials here on Law and Crime is we get in trouble when we get into the cover-up. Same thing with anything in life. The cover-up sometimes makes it worse for any of us. We have to go to a quick break. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on lawandcrime.com and across the country. Law enforcement in Texas made an arrest in a 37-year-old cold case of the disappearance of a 5-year-old boy. Authorities arrested 64-year-old Terry Woodson in connection with the disappearance of his 5-year-old nephew, Anthony Woodson, who went missing in August 1981. Investigators believe the missing child was beaten to death by his uncle. Woodson claims he left the sleeping child in the backseat of his car for a few minutes while he ran into a convenience store and noticed the child was gone once he arrived back home. Anthony's remains have not yet been located, but authorities charge Woodson for his murder.
Hello. Hi, can I see some identification from you? From me? I don't have a... I'm sorry, sir. I can't say.
2 women were arrested in Ozaukee County after leading authorities on a wild chase after a brief traffic stop, and it was caught on camera.
I want to see some ID. Before you step in the vehicle, I want to see some ID.
The 2 women, Jennifer Deskins and Jocelyn Zubia, led authorities on a wild chase through the village of Belgium in Wisconsin, utilizing two-way radios to communicate from their respective cars. Both women now face charges of fleeing and resisting officers. A man in Montana had his drug possession conviction tossed out by a judge after it was revealed an expert witness who testified against him reportedly stole drugs from a crime lab and used them prior to his testimony. The defendant, James Donald Bachtel, was arrested in 2017 for felony criminal possession of dangerous drugs after officers found a glass pipe with methamphetamine residue in his pocket. During his trial, the state called their forensic chemist, Derek Thrush, who testified as an expert against Bachtel earlier this year. Bachtel was eventually convicted, but the conviction is now being overturned since an internal investigation by the Montana Department of Justice's Forensic Science Division revealed Thrush removed drug evidence from the crime lab and ingested meth prior to giving testimony against Bachtel. Thrush pleaded guilty to 3 felony drug possession charges and misdemeanors for theft and official misconduct. Bachtel's new trial is set to begin on November 19th. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
Thanks, Anthony. And wow, not often that you hear a case where an expert is as corrupt as that expert pleading guilty to those charges, ingesting meth from an evidence bag on his way to testify in court, where the evidence itself was meth to get the defendant a guilty verdict. And now the defendant gets a new trial because the expert who was part of the chain of custody tampered with the evidence, went into the bag, and ingested the meth himself. Interesting set of facts. Latonia, Hines, let's talk about that for a second. Now he gets a retrial. But what about the fact that the evidence was already tampered with, and the fact that this guy, this expert, is clearly corrupt, pled guilty? Does this evidence even get to be used in a second trial? Is the chain of custody even valid anymore?
Well, I mean, that's something to be argued actually for a motion if they get to that point. I actually think this is going to be some type of plea deal that happens with this. He's already been in custody for a bit of time, whatever time he served, but at this point in time, it's such a problematic case for the prosecution, and having to go back and try to rehabilitate the prosecution or the state's case, very hard when you have the expert eating, using the drugs.
Yeah, they lost their expert, and now they lost the pure chain of custody that they had before to lay the foundation of the proper evidence. So I agree with you. This is likely a plea deal. But, well, I'm sure if it turns into anything exciting, you'll hear about it here at Law and Crime. All right, we're going to switch gears again because we do that here on the network. We're going to switch to another trial we've been covering today, which started today. It is the Angela Kilgore case. And this is the case where Angela Kilgore is on trial for killing a pawn shop owner. She allegedly went into the pawn shop to shoot and stab the owner in an attempted robbery, and then allegedly set the place on fire to destroy evidence. Let's take a look at opening statements. Welcome back. I'm Carissa Kranz. What you just saw there is prosecution's opening statements, or part of it. With me, Latonia Hines. Latonia, I want to talk about this before we have to go to a quick break. The prosecution is putting up its case, and they're showing pictures of what they're going to lay down as the foundation of what we're going to hear to prove how this was an intentional arson rather than an accident, which lit the place on fire. What do you make of it so far?
I think that they're doing what they need to do. It's all about foundation, and you bring that in. But I think what's going to be important also is when we start hearing from a medical examiner, because not only do you have to show that, that with regard to the arson itself, but when did he truly die? And why was this needed to be covered up? So I think they're going to go step by step to get all this in there.
Well, and that's what they have to do. And the pictures are certainly valuable images to put up at the prosecution's case. We have to go to a quick break. We're going to continue to watch this case closely, analyze it here, and be right back. Welcome back. I'm Carissa Kranz. What you were just hearing there was prosecution's opening statements, and the prosecution is certainly laying down the foundation of what we're going to hear and why they have such a strong case. You're hearing testimony about DNA evidence, how the DNA of the defendant and the victim was found on this knife, and how this knife was also found on the defendant when she was arrested. All information that the prosecution is going to have to actually prove when they put on their case. But As usual, the opening statements is a roadmap of what we can expect to hear at trial. With me, Latonia Hines, prosecutor. Latonia, I'm sure you're very well aware and used to being a prosecutor on a case where you give an opening statement and you promise to deliver certain facts and evidence later on. In this case, do you think that they're making their case, or do you think they're over-promising what the jury's actually going to get delivered to them? Because right now it seems like a slam dunk.
Well, DNA is DNA, so either they have it or they don't. And so obviously they're going to know that they have this beforehand. It's a really, really significant thing.
But anything can happen at trial. Anything can keep evidence from coming in. And if that happens, then you lose credibility with that jury.
Correct. But if you were the defense attorney, you would have already had a motion to suppress this evidence so that they couldn't even mention it to the jury, because you don't want them mentioning something that can never come in. But mind you, they could have another chance for trying to get that suppressed. But right now, I'm assuming that they had motions and this evidence is coming in, because that would be the normal thing. I think it's very, very hard for the defense to come by the fact that she had what would be the murder weapon on her when she was arrested. So it's going to be very interesting. So
why do you think this wasn't a plea deal in this case? Why do you think she's actually trying this case? I mean, it seems like a very strong prosecution case from what I see at this part. They have DNA. The murder weapon was on him. We have to go to a quick break, so give me a quick answer.
Oh, it happens all the time because you just don't want to have the sentencing that you're looking at. You don't want to have the punishment that's available to you.
Right, and we don't know what the plea deal was offered ahead of time, if any. Anyway, we're not aware of that at this time. So we'll see how it goes at trial. We do have to take a quick break. We're going to continue with testimony in the Kilgore trial when we return. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Okay, so we're listening to prosecution's opening statements in the Angela Kilgore trial, and they are putting up on a screen for the jury to see all the things that they're going to prove, and they seem to have DNA all over this case. DNA on the truck, DNA on the knife, DNA on the glove. Defense has not made their argument yet in opening statements, but we're going to hear that in a minute. But before we do, Latonia Hines, I want to give you an opportunity to comment on the prosecution's opening statement so far.
Well, it's pretty strong, and that's what it needs to be. It's all about the science, and that's what jurors like. They like being able to have something that they can sink their teeth into when they're back in the jury room. And so it's going to be up to the defense to go and break that all down, and they'll probably have their own expert to refute the expert of the state's case. But so far, the state's case seems pretty clear.
Pretty strong. What kind of expert
really
what kind of expert can we expect the defense to bring to overcome this kind of DNA?
Well, what they'll usually do is say that maybe how the testing was done here wasn't done correctly.
So they'll attack the testing.
Correct. They'll attack the testing, and they'll attack the officers about the way that they collected the evidence, that maybe they didn't preserve this evidence in the right way, and so that the test results really are not accurate.
So that's the defendant's the best way to attack this case, to attack the way the DNA was collected, how it was collected, and the method in which it was tested. Well, let's see what the defense plans to do and their response plan of action is going to be. We now have their opening statements. Let's take a look. Welcome back. I'm Carissa Kranz. What you were just listening to right there was defense opening statement in the Kilgore trial. She is on trial for allegedly killing a pawn shop owner by stabbing him and shooting him and then allegedly setting the place on fire to destroy evidence. That's the prosecution's case. But we just heard the defense say in opening statements that they are denying each and every allegation. They are attacking the DNA evidence already in opening statements, saying that DNA can be tricky. And they are saying that they're going to be able to prove that there's reasonable doubt all over this case just by poking holes in it. With me, Latonia Hines. Latonia, what you heard so far, what do you make of it?
I mean, I think that you're a defense attorney and you're doing what you need to do, and that's exactly it. The strongest pieces of evidence that the state has, you have to go and you have to attack it. But I think part of the problem that's going to happen is exactly what the defense said. He tried to get away from the connection that there was a fire and that the victim died. But the connection is that the victim didn't die from the fire. The victim was already dead because of his injuries, and then the fire was done to cover the fact that he was murdered. And it's going to be very hard for them to get around the medical evidence that's also going to come into play in this case.
Right. That was interesting when they said that the owner was still alive when she left the pawn shop. Who knows? We have to go to a quick break. We'll continue to monitor this trial for you, and we'll be right back in a few minutes.